Hello there. My name is Noah Bennett, and I want to thank you for being here with me tonight. Before we begin our story, I invite you to take a few quiet moments, just for yourself. Find a comfortable position. Let your shoulders soften. Rest your hands wherever they feel most at ease. If you wish, gently close your eyes. Our familiar favorites are with us again tonight. Let's take a slow, deep breath and allow ourselves to settle fully into bed, into stillness, and into peace. The world of our story this evening feels warm and familiar, a place many of you have come to love. It's cozy, comforting, and always waiting to welcome you back. As you snuggle beneath the covers, let that same sense of ease wash over you. Feel the softness beneath your head, the pillow gently cradling you, and allow your body to rest, completely supported, completely safe. Giving your neck muscles the opportunity to completely relax and embrace the luxurious sense of your entire body, gradually easing into a deep state of rest. Even if you feel some tension or achiness in some areas of your body, just know that gradually, as you continue to relax, they will all melt away, bit by bit, allowing you to drift into a soft and soothing sleep. For now, just enjoy the coziness of your bed and the coziness of tonight's story too. The raindrops pat us softly against the bedroom window. The rhythm of this early morning shower is the first thing Sophie hears as her mind drifts from dreams to wakefulness. She listens to every drop as it bursts gently on the glass, one by one. She counts them until there are too many to follow. So instead, she lets her mind wander as they all float together like grains of rice poured into a jar. This is the music of the season, she thinks. The rap of the rain and the timid rustle of leaves on branches. She smiles, picturing the beauty of the autumn colors and the gradual wrapping up of the year. Sophie yawns and stretches her arms out over her head. Darkness still lingers outside, but it's time for her to get up soon. She'll put on her hat and coat and walk down to her bakery to prepare for the first customers of the day. Although she starts her morning before all of her neighbors, Sophie doesn't mind. She loves what she does and always looks forward to putting the very first treats in the oven and brewing the first cup of coffee. The smiles on the faces of the people she knows make the early hours worth it. Plus, it means she's always ready for a good night's rest when the time comes. She sits up in bed and pulls the sheets away from her legs. Then she swings her feet over the edge. Her toes find the cozy warmth of plush slippers waiting on the floor. She shuffles into them and stands, yawning once more. Sophie softly tiptoes into the kitchen. It just feels right to be quieter at this hour, when night fades slowly in to day. Outside the window, she can see the first hint of morning light reflected in gray behind the house across the street. Her neighbor is still peacefully asleep, as he always is this early in the morning. He prefers to start his day slowly, only after the sun has climbed higher and a warm cup of coffee has found its way into his hands. Then, he heads to his garden, where he lovingly trims the grass and greets each of his flowers and bushes as if they were dear friends. His garden blooms with the most beautiful plants Sophie has ever seen. She smiles softly, a wave of gratitude warming her heart as she thinks of all the kind and gentle souls who share her street. Moving to the kitchen, Sophie begins her own little morning ritual. She brews a cup of strong black tea, her favorite way to start the day. As she pours in a splash of milk, she watches the creamy swirls dance through the dark tea, feeling a quiet joy settle over her. Slowly mixing with the darker counterpart, carefully carries it over to her spot on the wooden seat beneath the kitchen window. She sits down and brings the steaming cup to her lips. The first sip is always the best. She welcomes the taste in her mouth. The tea warms her from the inside like the embers of a cozy fire on a chilly day. Looking at the sky through the glass, Sophie sees the clouds have formed a heavy blanket that hangs over town. It's unlikely there will be a break in the rain today, she thinks, but that's nothing to worry about. It always rains like this in autumn, and she enjoys the special feelings that come along with this time of year. If there were no rain, she wouldn't need to pull on her warm and fuzzy sweaters or slip her feet into her favorite rubber boots. She wouldn't get to wear her cozy scarves or use her cheerful colored umbrella. Really, the rain is easy to enjoy, so long as you have warm clothes and a cup of tea. He takes the last sip and washes the cup in the sink, leaving it to dry on a little bamboo rack. Then, she walks to her bedroom and dresses for the day. With a final glance at her comfortable bed, she heads to the front door. There will be plenty of time to rest. Later on in the hallway, she pulls on her felt hat and woolen scarf and picks up her bright yellow umbrella. The door closes with a click behind her, and she steps out onto the walkway. She slides the umbrella open. It abruptly pops to life in a burst of color above her head. Sitting in the window of the house on her right is the little white cat. She's come to know well. Its owner is a lovely woman who usually wears her hair in a bun. The cat stares at Sophie as she passes, but its expression gives nothing away. She smiles at it and waves aside from her fluffy friend. No one else in the neighborhood has begun to stare. As she walks, Sophie passes quaint homes with dark windows still tucked in for the night. Few porch lights flicker above brick front steps, and the street lamps around her give off a soft yellow glow which pools with the rainwater on the pavement. She listens to the sound of the rain trickling down the fabric of the umbrella beneath its sunny yellow canopy. She is safe and dry. It reminds her of when she used to build pillow and blanket forts as a child, hidden away under the folds of cotton and fleece. She felt as though the whole world was distilled down into a quiet and protected space that was all her own. Sophie smiles at the memory and uses her free hand to pull the woolen scarf more closely around her. She skips over a puddle on her left and weaves around another on her right as she begins her descent of the hill leading to the bakery's parking area. In the distance, the brightly painted door of the shop glows against the morning gloom, a joyful burst of color in an otherwise quiet world. Swirls of green, blue, yellow, purple, and orange dance playfully across the wooden panels, as if welcoming every soul who passes by. She remembers that evening so clearly. A warm summer long ago, when she first painted that very door, with a brush in her hand and a spark of inspiration in her heart. She let her imagination flow freely, blending the rainbow of colors into graceful spirals that seemed to come alive under her touch. When she finally stepped back, brushing a strand of hair from her face, she noticed her overalls and hands, splattered with paint, shining with the story of her creativity. With flecks of dried paint, she laughed, caught up in the joy of bringing beauty to the ordinary, if only in a small way. Now, Sophie pulls out her set of brass keys and fits one into the lock on the door. It creaks open, revealing the dark interior of the still sleeping shop. She shakes off her umbrella and flicks a switch with her fingertip. The lights snap on, and she sighs with contentment. It's good to be back in the bakery. The smell of flour, sugar, and espresso beans greet her as she walks through the quiet shop. These aromas waft toward her from the kitchen, a reminder of yesterday's baking. There's also a hint of toasted pecans from the pie she made just before closing up. In her mind, she runs through all the things she plans to make today. As she gets the bakery ready to open, she turns on the oven to let it warm up. First, she'll do cinnamon rolls like always, she thinks to herself. But this time, she can add some toasted pecans for a little extra crunch. She brings over all the metal components of the espresso machine that she left drying on the rack the night before. She'll also be making pumpkin pie today. She remembers that every year, around this very time, her customers begin to ask the same sweet question. When will the pumpkin pies be ready? Some prefer just a slice to enjoy with their morning coffee, while others hope to bring home a whole pie to share with their loved ones. Sophie walks toward the cozy seating corner and kneels beside the wall. Her fingertips find the small plug, and as she slips it into the socket, strands of fairy lights flicker to life above her head. The soft golden glow fills the room like a quiet sigh. For a moment, she stands still, her thoughts calm, her heart at ease. Taking a deep breath, Sophie looks up at the lights, feeling warmth and peace gently settle around her. As she exhales, a sense of calm washes over her. It's important to slow down and enjoy the small moments, she thinks. After all, these are the ones that make life magical. Magical. With the lights shimmering on the ceiling, she walks over to the counter and into the small open kitchen area. From here, she has a clear view of the whole shop and can easily move from her baking table to the espresso machine. When people come in, she pulls 2 large white buckets of dough out from under the counter. The sticky dough has been rising here overnight. She pours it onto the wooden surface and spreads it out flat. Then she sprinkles it with cinnamon sugar and toasted pecans and uses the tips of her fingers to roll it into a large log. She slices it into discs, which have delicate spirals of filling running through them. She dusts the tops of each with more cinnamon sugar and then sets the tray in the oven to bake. After a few minutes, the delicious aroma of fresh cinnamon rolls wafts through the bakery. The comforting scent and the warmth of the oven intermingle, making Sophie feel right at home. A while later, the oven beeps, She takes out the tray of rolls and sets it on a wire rack to cool. Now it's time to start on the pie. She makes her way to the pantry at the back of the kitchen and opens the door. Sophie thinks of this space as her own magic room, packed full of all the ingredients and supplies that she could possibly need. Tubs of flour and baking powder are stacked beneath large canisters of spices and bottles of flavor extract. A jar of vanilla pods sits on the topmost shelf. There is star anise, fresh cloves and poppy seeds, onion powder, roasted garlic and chili flakes. And there on the bottom shelf, tucked near the back, are fresh sugar pumpkins than they should. Sophie sets her arm full of ingredients down on the counter. First, she has to roast the pumpkin. She carefully slices the gourd in half and scoops out the stringy interior and seeds. Then, she sets both sides face down on a baking tray and puts them in the oven to cook and soften while the oven works its magic on the pumpkin. Sophie gets to work on the crust. There are many different types of crusts she could make, but her favorite is graham cracker. She got the recipe from her Aunt Lucy, who always baked mini pies for all the children during the holidays. Sophie pulls a plastic sleeve of graham crackers from their blue cardboard box and sets it on the counter. She lays a tea towel over the package and gets out her large, heavy rolling pin. Gently, she rolls it back and forth over the towel, crushing the crackers below. She works the pin from side to side, feeling the smooth wooden handles move beneath her palms. The crackers crunch and snap under the weight. Once they are the texture of rough sand, she pulls open the corners of the bag and pours the contents into a mixing bowl. A little puff of graham cracker dust tickles her nose. Sophie walks to the large silver refrigerator and finds a stick of butter. She unwraps the waxy packaging and plops the stick into a mixing cup. It goes in the microwave for just a few seconds until the butter is melted. She pours the butter into the bowl with the crumbs and adds a good amount of sugar and cinnamon. Using a long wooden spoon, she mixes them all together until they feel like wet sand. With her fingers, she spreads the mixture into the bottom and sides of her shallow pie dish. She works over the crust methodically, careful not to let it crack along the edges. She pushes and presses a little more here, a little less there. Before long, it forms an even brown base. Then she slides the pie dish into its place. She sets the timer for 12 minutes, just enough to get the crust a little bit crunchy, so it holds up under the weight of the liquid filling. Just then, she hears a creak as the wooden door swings open. Her first customer of the day has arrived. As always, it's Seamus, the kind, elderly man who likes to read his paper with a cup of coffee and a cinnamon roll. The only exception is on days like today when she makes pumpkin pie. He smiles at Sophie as she pours a long, thin stream of coffee into a mug. He's been coming into her shop for so many years, he doesn't even have to order anymore. By the time he reaches the counter and wishes her a good morning, Sophie already has his breakfast ready to go. "Smells like pumpkin pie is on the menu," he says to her, taking his coffee in hand. She smiles and promises to bring him out a slice as soon as it's finished baking. He thanks her and takes up his usual seat by the window, snapping open the crisp fold of the morning newspaper. Now that he's here, it really feels like the day has begun. Sophie and Joy is working. While Seamus is in the shop, he is as much a part of this place as any of her other regular customers. Together, they are a community, a family almost, and they call the rainy day bakery home. She looks at the timer and sees the crust is ready to come out. She pulls on her mitts and removes the dish from the oven. It smells warm, sweet and toasty, just heavenly, as Seamus would say. Now, Sophie turns her attention to the pumpkin filling. With a spoon, she scoops out the orange flesh of the pumpkin from the skin and drops it into a large bowl. She mashes it around with a wooden spoon until it has an even and smooth consistency. She brings over eggs and heavy cream from the refrigerator and begins cracking the eggs one by one, adding them to the pumpkin. Then she pours in the cream, watching its milky whiteness trickle through valleys of orange puree like little pearly rivers. Sophie measures heaping spoonfuls of cinnamon, ground ginger, nutmeg, cloves and cardamom. Together, the spices call to mind everything familiar and comforting about this time of year. This is the aroma of the holidays, of family and togetherness. As she mixes, the air seems to hold her in a warm embrace of memory and scent. She creates the tiniest bit of lemon zest into the filling to brighten the flavor and give it a little zing. She stirs it one more time until the mixture is perfectly smooth and silky. Carefully, she pours the filling into the crust, using a spatula to clean the sides of the bowl and get every last drop. Then, she slowly carries the wobbly pie to the oven and puts it down gently on the rack with the timer set. She has a few moments to rest. She leans back against her table and looks out over the shop. There's a bookshelf in the corner where people have left little paperbacks and large hardbound art books. She's put in a few mystery novels herself over the years. After she finishes reading them, she likes to pass them on to someone else, knowing they'll bring the same kind of joy to new eyes. Near the shelf, there's a small hand-painted children's rocking chair. She found it in a second-hand shop years ago and brought it into the bakery for her smaller customers. Over time, various children added their own special touches to the chair. Now it's decorated with flowers and bees, squiggly lines and little scratches. The beep from the oven pulls Sophie back to the baking at hand. The pie is ready. She opens the oven door and a hot breeze meets her cheeks like dragon's breath. It carries with it the nutty and savory, sweet aroma of warm pumpkin pie. Sophie pulls the dish out of the oven and sets it on the counter. It caused there while she cleans up. All the mixing bowls, rolling pins, and measuring cups over by the window. She can see Seamus casting curious looks towards the pie. She laughs and cuts him a slice. On second thought, she cuts an extra piece for herself too. It's been a long morning already, and she can think of nothing better than sitting with an old friend for a taste of something sweet. Puts each slice on a small white dish and plops a dollop of fresh whipped cream on top. Then carries them over to the table by the window and sits down across from Seamus. Smells delicious, just like every year, he says sinking his fork into the filling. Sophie brings the first bite to her lips and savors the tanginess of the pumpkin against her tongue. The flavor is deep and aromatic. It fills her senses with warm, sweet spice. Perfect, she thinks. Just perfect. As she eats her pie, she looks around with pride at her little bakery. Seamus smiles. Good friends are excellent company on autumn days like this, she thinks. She looks at the fairy lights and watches them twinkle to the rhythmic pattering of the rain against the window. These are the details that make this place feel like home, Sophie thinks. The bakery tells the story of its customers, of all the people who have ever walked through its creaky wooden door. He smiles contented, knowing this is exactly where she's meant to be. Foreign drops tap the window panes near Sophie's bed every so often. A gust of wind tosses the rain towards the glass with slightly more force. Sophie lies under the covers with her eyes closed, listening to the sound of the storm ebb and flow. It's sure to be a blustery day, she thinks to herself. Its final moments in bed before she rises in the morning, as some of Sophie's favorites, when her thoughts are dreamy and her mind still remembers the feeling of deep sleep. Before long, she feels a yawn overtaking her and reaches her arms up and out in a big stretch. Next, she circles her ankles a few times to the right and then to the left, so they're ready to move when she steps out of bed. Sophie takes a deep breath in and then lets it out slowly as her body relaxes into a soft comfort of the sheets. Just a minute more, she thinks to herself. With a hint of a smile, the rain taps the window in waves, as though curtains of water are opening and closing. Over, another large gust of wind rattles the branches of the tree outside and sends a flurry of raindrops towards the house. Days like this are always exciting for Sophie, when the weather seems wild and unpredictable. It's as though the rain and wind encourage her to be a bit more spontaneous herself. With that thought, she pushes herself up until she's sitting on the edge of the bed, and then stands, glancing out the window as she does. As always, it's still dark outside. Sophie wakes up early in the most people in town, as she has to have the bakery open and ready by the time everyone else is starting their day. She knows the rest of the neighborhood is sleeping soundly. Even the house cats are probably dozing in fluffy beds or on pillows by windowsills, waiting for dawn. Sophie slides her feet into her comfy slippers and then pads softly into the kitchen. The first thing she does is put on the kettle for a nice cup of strong, hot tea. She leans against the counter as she waits for the water to boil, listening to the bubbles beginning to rumble within. Sophie takes out a small metal tea ball from the drawer and fills it with fragrant strands of loose-leaf black tea. Each leaf stands at a funny angle in the ball, so she has to be careful not to let any of them fall out as she twists on the top. She hangs the tea ball over the side of her cup by a tiny metal hook and chain. When the water is ready, she pours it over the tea. Bubbles rise up from within the metal ball, and it floats slightly before sinking to the bottom. A fan of tea color spreads out from it, shading the clear water as it swirls around. Sophie lifts the cup to her nose and inhales deeply. She loves the smell of hot tea on a chilly morning. Feeling spontaneous, she decides to skip her usual splash of milk, opting to drink it black today. But still desiring the comfort of her routine, she carries it over to the wooden seat beneath the kitchen window. This is where she always drinks her morning tea, gazing out at the sleepy neighborhood on the other side of the glass. Some mornings, the first rays of light would already be shining through the clouds by this time. But today, the sky is heavy and dark. A blanket of gray clouds hangs low over town, and the rain is continuous, shifted only by the ever-changing wind. She can see how it bends and sways the branches of the tree across the street. It's definitely coat weather today, she decides. Sophie sips her tea slowly, feeling herself warming up a bit more with every drop. She wiggles her toes inside her fuzzy slippers, enjoying the way it sends a tingling sensation across her skin. This is the most perfectly cozy morning, she thinks to herself. When she finishes her tea, she washes out the cup and sets it to dry on a bamboo rack by the sink. Although the sun hasn't come out yet, Sophie knows it's time to get ready to head down to the bakery. After so many years of opening her shop each and every morning, Sophie feels as though she has an internal clock that's calibrated to the second. She intuitively knows when she should be finishing her tea and when she needs to step out the door in order to make it to the bakery in good time. Sophie shuffles into her bedroom, picks out a grey shirt to wear. It's a fitting color to match the weather outside. When she's dressed, she heads to the front door. She slips on her thick wool coat and buttons it up at the front. Then she wraps a chunky cable-knit scarf around her neck. One of her regular customers, Rose, made it for her 2 winters ago. Now, it's one of her most cherished pieces of clothing. Every time she pulls it on, she thinks of all the people she's able to call friend, and it makes her feel warm and toasty in since. Sophie pulls one edge of the scarf up over her chin and then tucks the ends into her wool coat. She takes out a large pair of gloves from the coat pockets, slipping them on one by one. The last thing she has to get is her trusty yellow umbrella. Now, she's ready to head out, closes the door behind her, and pauses on the flat front step. To open the umbrella, the wind pushes against it, making it hard to raise the slider up to expand to the canopy. But with a little determination, Sophie gets it open, adding a splash of yellow to the otherwise dark morning. Bracing herself against the wind, she steps out onto the sidewalk. Heavy raindrops thunder against the fabric of the umbrella. The sound is magnified beneath it so she can hear the plop and splat of every drop. She spies the small white cat that's always waiting for her in her neighbor's window. But this morning, the cat is still asleep in the warmth of the house, with its pink nose tucked under its fluffy tail. Usually the cat is awake and washing its paws or following her path with watchful eyes. But today is a lazy day for the white cat. Sophie watches as it naps contentedly behind the glass. For a moment, she wishes that she too could be at home, tucked up in bed. But then she thinks of her regular customers and it brings a smile to her face. They are the reason she gets up each and every day, rain or shine, and opens the door to the rainy day bakery. She continues walking down the wet pavement towards town. Every few steps, she has to move to one side or the other to avoid a large puddle. The sidewalk glistens in the glow of the streetlights. And still, the sun is nowhere to be found. This will probably be one of those days where it stays dark until noon, she thinks. Up ahead, she catches a glimpse of the brightly painted bakery door. Even in the dim light, the brilliant colors stand out, welcoming in all who pass by. It's a haven for people on a day like this. They can come inside, drink a cup of something hot, and have a slice of pie or a cinnamon roll, and read a good book. Some customers prefer to chat to one another, enjoying the company of new friends and old in a familiar place. Her bakery really has become part of the fabric of this community. She realizes it's a home away from home, a spot where everyone can find something to make
them feel happy and content. Yeah? Just as this thought crosses her mind, a gust of wind rumples the fabric of her umbrella. The handle jumps in her fingers, and before she knows what's happening, the top canopy of the umbrella has blown backwards. No longer protected from the rain, Sophie makes a dash for the colorful door. She pulls out her set of brass keys and inserts the right one into the lock. She clutches her bent umbrella under her arm and pushes open the door to reveal the dark, silent bakery. Sophie wipes her feet on the entry mat so she won't leave quite as many wet footprints in her wake. Then she flexed the light switch with her fingertip, illuminating this small shop. Now that she's able to see a bit better, Sophie looks down to inspect the damage to her yellow umbrella. Fortunately, several of the connecting pieces of metal are bent in the wrong direction. Also, the slider no longer catches, so the canopy doesn't stay propped open anymore. With a sigh, she places the umbrella down on the ground in the entryway. It has served her well for many years, but it's time for a replacement. Sophie had planned to be in the bakery all day, so she isn't sure when she'll have time to shop for a new one. It might end up being a very damp walk home tonight, she thinks to herself, but that's all right. She's used to the weather here, and she'll just have to make the best of it. Sophie takes a deep breath to clear her mind, and then exhales, refocusing on the tasks of the day. She smells the familiar hints of espresso beans, flour, and pecans lingering from the evening before. On a typical day, she makes cinnamon rolls first thing, but like with her tea, she's feeling spontaneous. The wind or the rain patterning heavily on the ground outside. But Sophie thinks it's time for a change. She heads into the cozy seating area and leans down to plug in a strand of fairy lights. Within moments, they twinkle on overhead like diamonds. With a bit more pep in her step, she walks back into the pantry. She runs her gaze over the shelves, stacked high with baking supplies and ingredients. But what do I want to make today? She whispers to herself. She made a blueberry pie 2 days ago, lemon squares and pecan rose yesterday, and chocolate muffins last week. Those are all favorites with the customers. But then, Sophie considers what would make her happy. Few years back, Sophie found her grandmother's cookbook on a shelf in the family house. As she was leafing through the old pages, Sophie stumbled upon a recipe she had never tried before. It looked so inviting that she slipped a small piece of paper between the pages to mark the spot. Now, her grandmother's beloved cookbook rests on a dark wooden shelf at the back of the pantry. Its spine a little worn, its presence comforting and familiar. With a soft smile, Sophie walks over and opens it to that special page. The recipe is titled simply, Baked Apples. In the margins, yellowed softly with time, She spots her grandmother's graceful handwriting, a tiny note that reads, "Perfect for a chilly autumn day."
Here and there across the page, her grandmother wrote in corrections to the original recipe, little tips and slight changes of measurements to make the final product even better. This is what I'll make today. Sophie decides it's time to try something new. The ingredient list is fairly simple. She needs butter, brown sugar, cinnamon, nutmeg, rolled oats, chopped pecans, and several large apples. Sophie gathers the ingredients and carries them back behind the counter. She leaves the butter out to soften. Then she begins preparing the nuts. She chops them coarsely and sets them to the side before measuring out the oats. Finally, she turns on the oven and leaves it to preheat. The next part of the recipe is a bit trickier. She has to core the apples and make a pocket for the filling. Without splitting them in half, her grandmother wrote in the margin beside it, "Used paring knife and spoon," it instructs her. Sophie picks up her paring knife and inserts the tip near the stem of the first apple. She slides it in and cuts in a careful circle around to the core. Then she twists it slowly to help the core detach closer to the bottom. With a gentle pull, it comes free. The hollowed-out apple reminds her of a pumpkin with its seeds removed. She sets the fruit aside and moves on to the next one. Soon the task feels routine. She's able to remove the core with one swift movement over and over again, until she has a row of apples ready to be filled. Next, it's time to make the filling. Sophie gathers the softened butter, sugar, cinnamon, and nutmeg, and mashes them all together with a wooden spoon. When the spices are evenly distributed, she stars in the oats and pecan pieces. Then she takes a spoon and carefully stuffs the filling into the apples, right up to the top. When the apples are prepared, she lines them up carefully in ceramic pie dishes. Sophie pours water into each dish so the bottoms of the apples are just submerged. Prevents drying and burning, grandmother wrote. Finally, she's ready to put them into the oven. She slides her hands into thick oven mitts and places the pie dishes on the metal racks. Sophie closes the oven door and sets the timer to let her know when she needs to check them. As she's beginning to clear up her workspace, she hears the door to the bakery creak open. It's Rose, one of her favorite customers, and someone she now considers a friend after all these years. Rose smiles and waves from the door before unwrapping her scarf and hanging it over the back of a chair. Sophie has her coffee ready by the time she's heading over to the counter. Rose thanks her with a warm smile and then asks how Sophie's day's been going so far. Sophie tells her all about the baked apples from her grandmother's recipe. She's excited to have her first taste tester, if Rose is interested. The pair chat about the weather and how it's an especially blustery autumn day. Then, with a sigh, Sophie mentions her broken umbrella. "I don't know if I'll have time to replace it before I head home tonight," she says. Rose pets her on the arm. "Sure, it will all turn out just fine," she replies, before carrying her coffee to her table and sitting down. Soon after, one of the other regular customers, Seamus, arrives. Sophie brings him his coffee and promises him a baked apple when they're out of the oven. One by one, all of her morning customers file in. Some of them look like they've run through the storm, wearing coats splattered with raindrops. Others carry folded newspapers over their heads or open the door to shake out their umbrellas. She serves them a variety of coffees, teas, and sweets. When the timer goes off, Sophie turns away from the seating area and faces the oven. Carefully pulls out the pie dishes filled with apples, which are now soft and gooey. Out of the corner of her eye, Sophie notices Rose speaking with different customers. She wonders what they're all talking about at this time of the morning, but it's just a passing curiosity as her mind returns to the task at hand. She carefully plucks the apples out of the water-filled pie dishes and sets them on individual plates. Then she walks over to the refrigerator and takes out a carton of whipping cream. She pours some in a bowl and spoons a bit of sugar on top. Then she uses a handheld mixer to beat it into whipped cream. The mixer drones on as the beaters spin, and Sophie watches Rose head out the door. But she hasn't even tried her baked apple yet, Sophie thinks. When soft peaks form in the white cream, she stops beating. With a metal spoon, Sophie drops a dollop of whipped cream on every apple, along with a drizzle of her famous caramel sauce. The warm fragrance of the hot apples and rich cream is tantalizing. It permeates the air, creating an atmosphere of homey comfort. Carries the first plate out to Seamus and sets it in front of him. Next, there are plates for the family in the corner. The woman with the newspaper and the man who usually orders cranberry scones. As she's distributing the apples, Sophie sees Rose walk back through the door. In her hand is a long, thin package wrapped in shiny paper. Rose beckons to Sophie, who comes over, he says, handing her the package. On it is a handwritten note. To Sophie, from all your friends at the Rainy Day Bakery. Sophie pulls open the paper to reveal a brand new umbrella. Inside, this one is green with yellow polka dots and a handle in the shape of a duck's head. This might be the most cheerful umbrella I've ever seen in my life, Sophie says to Rose, her eyes sparkling with delight as she admires it. You all are too kind. Glancing around the room, she notices the other customers smiling just as brightly. Then it dawns on her. This beautiful umbrella is a gift from all of them, from her friends. The realization fills her heart with warmth and quiet joy. This little shop and the people within it make her feel truly at home. I've got something for you too, Sophie says with a playful wink, handing Rose one of the last 2 baked apples, the ones made from her grandmother's treasured recipe. The other Sophie keeps for herself. Together, they sit by the window, gazing at the wet gray and windy day outside. But here in the Rainy Day Bakery, everything and everyone, safe, warm, and loved. Sophie uses a spoon to scoop out some of the soft apple and gooey filling. Perfectly spiced and deliciously sweet. And it's made even more so knowing that her grandmother guided her along the way. And she's sharing it now with the best of friends. The first thing Sophie hears when she opens her eyes, the sound of gentle rain coming down outside her window. There isn't even a hint of wind, so it's just the steady rhythmic sound of droplets hitting the ground. She yawns, bringing her arms up over her head and stretching her legs out as far as they'll go. Then, she relaxes into her soft bed, enjoying these last few moments of restfulness before the day begins. Sophie has a big day ahead. She'll be hosting the annual cookie decorating party at the bakery. She made several batches of sugar cookies yesterday, but she's still got more to do before people start arriving later this morning. This is one of her favorite times of year. The bakery is always a nice place to be, but on Cookie Day, it's full of warmth, laughter, and the smiling faces of her friends and neighbors. Sophie stretches once more, and then shifts our legs over the side of the bed and sits up. Her fuzzy slippers are right where she left them last night. She puts them on and then pulls her robe off the hook on the back of her bedroom door. Snuggling into its cozy warmth, she walks quietly into the kitchen. Her morning routine is almost always the same. Fast. She puts the kettle on while she waits,
She fills a metal table with a delicious cranberry orange spiced black tea. It's one of her favorites to drink in winter when the water is hot. She pours it over the table to the cup and breathes deeply as the spicy steam fills the air around her. She pours in a splash of milk and then carries it over to her wooden window seat. The sun rises later at
This time of year, so it's still quite dark outside. She can see the hint of a night light in her neighbor's house across the street. But most people here are still asleep. Because she opens the bakery every morning, Sophie has to be awake before everyone else. She's always enjoyed that part of her job, being the one to usher people into their day with a cup of coffee and something sweet. She hopes it helps them start off right. Although she gazes out the window for quite some time, the sky overhead stays dark and cloudy. They were forecasting snow today, she thinks to herself. I wonder if it will come after all. She brushes the back of her hand against the cold glass of the window. Just has to get a bit colder, she thinks with a smile. Snowy days always make the bakery a bit more magical to Sophie. From where she works behind the counter, she has a clear view out the windows to the street. Whenever it snows, she likes watching it pile up on the pavements, where children run through it laughing and smiling, or build snowmen by the street lamps. She's always enjoyed watching the rain too, of course, but everyone needs a little extra magic sometimes. Sophie takes her last sip of tea and carries the cup over to the sink. She washes it and leaves it to dry on her bamboo rack. Then, she heads back into her bedroom to get dressed. Every year during the cookie party, Sophie wears the same charming sweater. She got it several years ago as a Christmas gift. It features a friendly snowman with large trees in the background. The snowman was knit as a pile of squares rather than circles and has a very goofy grin. It makes her smile every time she wears it, and her customers always seem to enjoy it too. When she's ready, she walks out of her bedroom to the front entryway. Sophie pulls on her coat, scarf, hat, and gloves. Then she picks up her new umbrella, green with yellow polka dots and a handle shaped like a duck's head, and loops the cord around her wrist. Closing her door with a click, she steps out into the early morning rain. It's let up a bit since she was in bed. Now it's more of a drizzle, but she still prefers the warm and dry comfort to be found beneath her umbrella. Sophie slides it open and holds it above her head. The drops make a gentle pitter-patter on the cheerful fabric as she begins to walk down the road. Every time she uses this umbrella, it makes her think of her friends and longtime customers at the bakery. When her trusty old umbrella broke during an autumn storm, they bought her a new one as a gift. It was a gesture of kindness she thinks about often, and she's happy for the reminder on this rainy morning as she gazes up through the colorful polka dots streaked with lines of water. Looking over at her neighbor's window, she's surprised to see a black cat instead of a white one. It appears that term with watchful eyes as it presses its nose to the glass. Then, just behind it, Sophie spots a flicker of white. Sure enough, it's a tail belonging to the cat she's used to seeing on her walk to work. She watches as the two cats shift and curl up together, their bodies forming perfect half circles, like two pieces of a pattern finally complete. How lovely, Sophie thinks, smiling to herself. Now the white cat has a new friend. They can keep each other company. With that comforting thought, she continues down the quiet street toward the bakery. Before long, the familiar door comes into view, its swirl of colors softly glowing in the faint gray light of early morning.
The horizon is just beginning to blush with dawn, revealing each hand-painted hue one by one. Sophie slides the key into the lock, turns the handle gently, and pushes the door open, ready to begin another peaceful day.
Tapping into the warmth of the bakery, she gently shakes out her umbrella and leaves it to dry in the entryway. Sophie wipes her feet on the mat. A man takes a deep breath in. It's her way of transitioning from outside to inside. She can smell the ever-present aroma, roasted coffee beans, along with a hint of burnt sugar from yesterday's cookies. It makes her think of toasted marshmallows with its sharp sweetness. She steps forward, flicks on the lights, bringing the bakery to life. She walks over to the seating area, bends down, and plugs in the strand of fairy lights that twinkle overhead. Now she's ready to start the day. Normally, she begins by making a big batch of sticky cinnamon rolls. But on this day, everything's a bit different. She still has a couple of batches of cookies to make. To ensure she has enough of all the right kinds for later, Sophie heads over to the pantry and gets out all the dry ingredients she'll need. She's making double batches of both chocolate chip cookies and stained glass sugar cookies. First, she pulls out flour, white sugar, brown sugar, vanilla extract, black treacle, and chocolate chips. Then she finds the cornstarch and salt. And finally, she pulls out a bag of colorful heart candies. She'll melt these down to form the panes of glass in the stained glass cookies. From the refrigerator, she gets the baking soda and eggs. The butter has been softening on the countertop, so it's the perfect texture to use now. Sophie divides everything by batch. That mixes the dry and wet ingredients in separate bowls. When she's ready, she combines these until the dough is the perfect consistency for the chocolate chip cookies. She folds in the chips carefully so they don't break apart, then piles the dough evenly onto a tray using an ice cream scoop, and puts the tray in the oven to bake. For the stained glass cookies, she wraps the dough and then places it into the refrigerator to chill. This will help it firm up so it's easier to roll out and cut into shapes later on. Just as the delicious fragrance of baking cookies begins to fill the air, her first customer of the day walks in. As usual, it's Seamus, here for his cup of coffee and sweet treat. Most days he enjoys a cinnamon roll, but on cookie day, he likes to be the first to sample whatever Sophie has in the oven, just to be sure they've turned out all right. He always jokes, with a twinkle in his eye, she has his coffee poured before he reaches the counter and slided across the wooden surface towards him. Seamus adjusts the newspaper he has folded under his arm before picking up the cup. "What kinds are you making this year?" he asks, eyeing the oven hopefully. "Chocolate chip, plain sugar, and stained glass," says Sophie with a smile. "I suppose I'll have to test out one of each, if you'll let me," he says. "After all, I've got to make sure they've turned out all right, don't I?" Sophie laughs and nods her head. "Of course you do," she says. "I couldn't do cookie day without you." Seamus walks over to the window, sits down. He has the perfect view of the street with all its puddles, just as the first rays of morning light are beginning to fill the sky behind the thick cover of clouds. Though the sun has yet to break through the clouds, it makes them a lighter shade of gray. Just then, the timer tells Sophie the chocolate chip cookies are ready to come out of the oven. She slips her hands into her oven mitt and opens the door. A warm gust of air greets her as she peers inside.
The cookies are puffy and golden brown, and the chocolate is gooey and thick. Even though it's still holding its shape, more or less, he pulls out the tray, sets it on a wire rack to cool. The warm, sugary smell of freshly baked cookies fills the bakery. Some magical scent, Sophie thinks, making every place it appears feel more like home. Soon it's time for her to retrieve the sugar cookie dough from the refrigerator. It's cold and firm to the touch. Setting it on her wooden table, she takes out her rolling pin. With smooth, deliberate motions, she rolls out the dough until it's the perfect thickness. Then she uses square, rectangular, and circular cookie cutters to shape it. Once she has the basic outlines, she uses a second set of cutters to remove smaller designs from the center of the cookies. There are bells, trees, ornaments, snowflakes, and more. She carefully arranges the cookie shapes on a baking sheet, each one waiting patiently to become something beautiful. Next, she sorts handfuls of colorful hard candy into small bags by shade: ruby red, amber, emerald, and gold. With her rolling pin, she gently crushes them into sparkling pieces, like tiny shards of light. Using a teaspoon, Sophie sprinkles the sweet, glittering dust into the hollow centers of each cookie. She knows that once they're warmed in the oven, the candy will melt and flow together, forming little windows of stained glass framed perfectly by golden dough. When the trays are ready, she slides them into the oven with a quiet smile. For a few peaceful moments, as the kitchen fills with the scent of sugar and warmth, Sophie allows herself to simply slow down and breathe and enjoy the day unfolding beforehand. The sky is brighter now, though it's still drizzling outside. People are beginning to come out of their homes, some walking, others driving. A handful of other customers trickle in one by one, including Rose, one of her regulars, and Gwen Spencer, along with her 2 young twin boys. The only reason Sophie can tell the twins apart is because one wears glasses and one doesn't. Otherwise, they are dressed exactly the same, in red shirts and blue jeans, with green fuzzy walker socks. The twins are only 2 years old, and they both enjoy toddling around the bakery, playing in the kids' corner, and greeting the other guests. They also know they are likely to get a sweet treat from Sophie whenever they come to visit. Seeing them reminds Sophie that she still has some preparation to do before the cookie party begins. Wiping her hands on her apron, she walks over to the pantry and gathers all of the cookie decorating supplies she can find. There are sprinkles in every shape, and color thin ones, flat ones, and round gold and silver balls she also finds. Jars of colored decorative sugar, green, blue, red, yellow, and purple. There are chocolate cows, coconut flakes, and tins of crushed peppermint candy. She places them all into a large basket, which she carries out to the seating area. She lays out an assortment of decorations on every table, along with tubes of icing sugar and colorful gel, and shakers filled with powdered sugar. Finally, from the very back of the pantry, she pulls out a large metal tree. Each of the branches is ripped so that ornaments can be hung from it all the way down. But instead of ornaments, the tree will hold as many of the decorated cookies as it can. When her timer goes off, Sophie returns to the oven and removes the stained glass cookies, smiles to herself. They look absolutely perfect. Each cookie has a glossy center in bright and vivid red, blue, orange, yellow, or green. As they cool, she gets out the plain sugar cookies she made yesterday. These have already been cut into fun shapes, like snow people, evergreen trees, snowflakes, and stars. One by one, she arranges all of the different types of cookies onto large silver platters. Every table will have its own, so people can choose to decorate whatever they'd like. But before she carries out the larger trays, she has a special delivery to make. She places one of each kind of cookie onto a small plate, which she sets down right in front of Seamus. He smiles broadly as he lifts the chocolate chip cookie to his mouth, taking a bite. He sighs with contentment. "I think these are the best cookies you've ever made," he says. "In fact, I think they're the perfect cookies." This is what he tells her every year about each of the cookies. Happiness wells up inside Sophie as she thinks of the satisfaction of a job well done. Every time she bakes a cinnamon roll, a croissant, or a cookie that someone enjoys, the knowledge makes her day a little brighter. Returning to the counter, she retrieves each of the larger trays and sets them on the tables. Then, glancing up at the clock, she sees that it's just about time for people to start arriving. As if on cue, the door opens and the first guests wander inside. It's one of the new families in town. They glance around with an endearing shyness. Sophie waves to them and lets them know they can choose a table and start any time they'd like. They smile gratefully and pick a spot close to the door. Next comes an elderly couple who are here visiting their grandchildren. They always stop by if they have time while they're in town. They sit near Seamus, exchanging friendly greetings before settling in one by one. People Sophie knows from around town pour into her bakery, old and young, by themselves or with family and friends. All are welcome to the annual cookie decorating party. Everyone finds a place to sit or stand around the tables crowded with supplies. Before long, the whole shop is abuzz with chatter, laughter, and the sound of people shaking sprinkles, squeezing icing tubes, and having fun looking around the cozy space. Sophie feels completely at peace. She can't imagine a better place to be. Right here, feeling the warmth and comfort of community as the thought crosses her mind, she glances out the window, in time to see the very first snowflakes fall to the ground. Soon one of the children sees them too. "It's snowing," the girl says, tapping her mother on the shoulder and pointing through the glass. Sophie hears the chatter slow to quiet whispering as everyone turns to gaze out the window. Delicate dusting of snow appears on everything outside, from cars to street lamps and paving stones. For a moment she wonders if her neighbor's cats are watching the snow falling outside their window too. Perhaps it's the joy of being around everyone in the bakery. Or maybe it's the magical nature of winter. Sophie isn't sure. But she's drawn outside, feel the touch of snow on her skin, even for just a moment. Quietly, she slips around the front of the counter and over to the door. Then she pulls it open, steps outside. Looking up to the sky, Sophie spreads her arms out to either side and twirls slowly in a circle. Snowflakes land on her cheeks and nose, and she smiles, her eyes crinkling at the corners. Feeling like a child again, she sticks out her tongue and catches a cold snowflake on it. More land on her arms and in the palms of her hands as she turns, laughing to herself. Then she pauses for a moment, still looking skyward, to appreciate the beauty of the snowy day. Everything seems quieter, covered in a magical hush wrought by the snow. In the distance, a crow waddles across the white ground, leaving a trail of footprints behind it. Sophie's boots have left imprints in the snow too, she sees, with a happy smile. She waves goodbye to the crow and the snow, and makes her way back inside. The wall, the warm, toasty bakery all around her. People are enjoying themselves as they decorate cookies. She sees palm-sized snow people with scarves and hats, green frosted trees with colorful ornaments, white and blue snowflakes with delicately iced edges, and white candles with curving yellow flames. There are stained glass cookies dusted with powdered sugar and attached to pieces of ribbon and string, and chocolate chip cookies with the occasional bite missing. The first few people have begun to hang some of their cookie ornaments on the metal tree in the corner. While most of the people take their cookies home, many leave one behind on the tree, where it will stay until the new year. Sophie picks up one of the stained glass cookies and lifts it to her lips, takes a bite, feeling the deliciously buttery crumbs melt in her mouth at its center. The pain of candy glass is sweet on her tongue. There's nothing better than a freshly baked cookie, Sophie thinks to herself. For the rest of the day, she'll help her friends decorate their cookies in countless fun and unique ways, and maybe even have an afternoon coffee as a treat. But for now, she's content to stand here, taking in the festive atmosphere. That's the magical snowfalls outside the window of the bakery. Foreign patterning on the glass gently eases Sophie into wakefulness. She doesn't open her eyes at first, but keeps them softly closed as she savors a few more moments of quiet rest. Without even noticing, she drifts off again, the soft rhythm of rain blending with the gentle images in her mind. Glistening streets, tiny puddles, and the hush of a gray morning. Slowly, the dream begins to fade, and her thoughts return to her cozy bedroom. With a sleepy smile, Sophie opens her eyes, grateful for those few extra minutes of rest. The rain outside has softened now, its patter almost gone. Maybe it'll stop completely, she thinks, stretching her arms above her head. She traces small circles with her toes beneath the blanket, feeling her ankles warm with each gentle movement. The simple joy of waking up slowly to a peaceful day. Turn. Then she slides her legs over the edge of the bed once her feet have found their comfy slippers. Sophie makes her way into the kitchen like she does most mornings. She puts the kettle on for a nice cup of tea. She loves the sound of the bubbles forming inside it, familiar and soothing, a kind of cozy background noise to the otherwise quiet morning. Bubbles and rain are the two things Sophie can always depend on at this time of day that make this place feel like home. Before the sun comes out, she thinks about the other small, meaningful details of her life as she spoons dry tea leaves into a tall table, twisting on the top. She hangs the ball by a tiny chain from the rim of her mug. Once the water is boiled, Sophie pours it over the leaves. She watches the hot water take on the color of the tea leaves as they steep. This is a detail she appreciates no matter how many mornings she watches her tea. It always creates new color patterns in the mug. The act of making tea is familiar and yet new and exciting at the same time. She thinks Sophie pours a splash of milk into her tea and then carries it over to her wooden window seat, looking out through the glass. She can see her neighborhood is still shrouded in darkness. The rain has given way to a light mist, and she can make out the first wisps of fog rolling in behind her neighbor's house. The man who lives across the street keeps a beautiful garden during the spring and summer months. Even now, in autumn, everything growing around his house seems perfectly in its place. The brown, red, and yellow leaves that have already fallen from the trees overhanging his lawn remind Sophie of an artistic splattering of paint on a green canvas. Possible is still asleep at this time of morning. Most of the neighborhood is, I must be one of the earliest risers in town, Sophie thinks with a smile. But she doesn't mind the hours she has to keep to run the bakery. It makes her happy to know that her customers always have a place to go when they wake up too. As
she gazes across the street, Sophie notices a small bit of earth that's recently been turned. He must have planted his bulbs yesterday. She realizes it reminds her that she should probably do the same. There's a small garden just outside the bakery, where Sophie has experimented with planting various things over the years. One year, she planted herbs, another, tomatoes and peppers. Now, it's a flower garden, or it will be in springtime. But she needs to get her bulbs in the ground soon. They rely on the cool autumn soil to wake up from their slumber and put down roots. For this spring, I'll have to remember to bring them with me to the bakery today, she tells herself after finishing her tea. Sophie takes one final glance out the window. The fog is rolling in around the house across the street now. Fog was in the forecast, Sophie remembers. She's always enjoyed a good foggy day. Something mysterious and magical about fog, she thinks, as though enchantments and worlds of possibility are hidden just out of sight. The thought makes her grin as she stands and carries her mug over to the sink. After washing it out, she leaves it to dry on the bamboo rack and heads into the bedroom to get dressed. Today, she chooses a red shirt with yellow details to wear if it's going to be a gray day. She might as well bring a pop of color with her outfit, she thinks. By the front door, she finds a paper bag filled with flower bulbs. They are fairly round and in between hard and soft to the touch. The daffodil, narcissus, and crocus bulbs remind her of onions and garlic, while the hyacinth bulbs are reminiscent of turnips because of their reddish-purple color. Sophie slips on her coat and gently stuffs the bag with the flower bulbs into the large pocket, puts on her hat and gloves, and loops the handle of her green and yellow polka dot umbrella around her wrist. She opens the door and for a moment stands and looks out onto the quiet street. The fog is obscuring her view in all directions. She can only just make out the line where the pavement meets the road in front of her house. She imagines the rest of the homes are sleeping, soundly tucked away in gentle folds of gray. Sophie takes a deep breath. The fog and the rain before it have had a cleansing effect on the air. Smells cool and rejuvenating. Feeling refreshed, she closes the door behind her and begins her walk. Small puddles dot the pavement, but none are so big that Sophie has to walk around them. Her boots allow her to make her way through them with a little care and attention. Mustn't have been raining very hard or for much time last night, she thinks. It's nice to walk down to the bakery without her umbrella open too. She takes advantage of this and looks up into the gray sky. The fog encircles the tops of the trees that line the street, weaving in and out of their brown branches and among their colorful leaves. Sophie reaches out her hand and swishes it quietly through the air. She can feel the mist gathering on her skin. Looking at her hand once, pulls it back, she sees it's dotted with countless translucent droplets. Normally she'd be tempted to wipe her fingers on her coat to dry them off, but instead she brings her hands together, inviting the moisture into her skin, as though she's applying lotion. It's soothing knowing she's connected to this place, this weather, to the trees and the sky. Sophie lets her gaze fall on the space where she knows her neighbor's house should be. She can see the edge of his drive, but the house is hidden behind a white and gray mass of fog. Her neighbor has 2 cats,
one white and one black. Sophie hopes they're snuggled up together in their favorite window seat, dreaming of warm summer sunshine, catnip. As she continues on her way, she listens to the rhythmic sound of her feet tapping the pavement with every step. The fog makes sounds feel closer than normal. Everything is amplified under this blanket of weather. It takes longer than usual for Sophie to spot the bakery. It's recognizable, multicolored.
Door peeks out from behind a swirl of fog for just a moment before being tucked away once again. Sophie smiles. Even if she couldn't see the door at all, she'd still know it was there. She's done this very same walk every morning for so many years. She could probably find her way blindfolded. But still, it's a comfort to see it and to know she'll soon be stepping inside, surrounded by the familiar aromas of coffee beans, sugar, and flour, and plugging in the twinkling fairy lights that will bring her little shop to life. She pulls out her set of keys and inserts the right one into the lock. Heading inside, she wipes her feet on a mat and then switches on the overhead lights. Then she takes off her coat and hangs it up, leaving the bulbs in the pocket before going behind the counter. She finds the end of the strand of fairy lights in the seating area and plugs them in. They flicker to life above her. That might be my favorite moment of the day, she thinks to herself. She knows she's back home at the bakery as soon as the fairy lights are twinkling overhead. With a feeling of gratitude for this comforting space, she takes a deep breath, inhaling the deliciously familiar scents within it. The coffee beans, synthetic yet rich. The flour is dusty and reminds her of weekends spent with her grandmother, baking all sorts of wonderful treats. And the sugar is sweet and a little bit burnt, reminding her of days at the fair and holiday cookies shaped like trees and ornaments. Exhaling feels her muscles relax. She rolls her shoulders a few times, allowing them to warm up and stretch out. Then she walks behind the counter. Before she left the bakery yesterday, she set aside a recipe for one of her favorite cold weather treats, to make fudge. Looking at the worn, handwritten page smeared with cocoa powder fingerprints and torn at one corner is enough to bring the rich chocolate taste to mind. Yes, she thinks, this is exactly what I want to make today. One of her favorite things about this recipe is how simple it is. It only calls for 2 base ingredients: chocolate chips, sweetened condensed milk. Sophie thinks for a moment about the flavors of fudge she'd like to make. Some of her regular customers always request peppermint, so she'll have to get out the peppermint extract and the package of candy canes to crush on top. Rose loves hazelnut fudge, so she'll need whole hazelnuts for the top. And finally, she's been in the mood for some rich orange chocolate, so that's what she'll make for herself. She even has some leftover candied orange peel that she can use to give it an extra kick. She heads into the pantry and finds her trusty double boiler. The right size pans, wax paper, chocolate chips, sweetened condensed milk, and all the flavorings and toppings. Balancing them in her arms, carries them behind the counter, setting them down carefully. Sophie admires her shiny silver double boiler. It's the secret to well-melted chocolate chips, her mother told her. Over the years, she's used bowls over pots and other variations. But when it came time to open the bakery, her mother's words echoed in her mind. So she got her very own gleaming double boiler,
Sophie fills the bottom pot halfway with water and then nestles the second pot on top. She places it on the stove and then shakes a good portion of chocolate chips into the top pot. As the water below heats up, the steam melts the chocolate, even without causing it to burn. With a wooden spoon, she gently stares the chips, watching as they transform hard to malleable to soft and gooey as they move round and round the pot. Soon they've melted together into a molten lake of chocolate, adds the sweetened condensed milk, and stares to combine them. She'll make the peppermint fudge first. So once she removes the boiler from the heat, she adds a spoonful of extract and stares again. The sharp, cooling scent of peppermint fills her nose, opening her senses and making her think of cold winter days full of ice and snow. Before it has a chance to cool too much, she pours the chocolate mix into a pan lined with wax paper. Ribbons of fudgy liquid cascade into the metal holder, filling every corner like lava running through a rocky channel. Sophie uses the wooden spoon to scrape the sides of the pot, making sure every bit of fudge is accounted for. Then she gently lifts the pan and taps it on the counter, helping the liquid fill any remaining gaps and evening out the top. Now it's time to add the topping. From a nearby drawer, she retrieves a heavy rolling pan. One by one, she unwraps several red and white candy canes. Peeling back the plastic in strips, her fingertips get ever so slightly sticky as they touch the sugary sweets. She places the candy canes in a bag between two towels and then pushes the rolling pin back and forth on top. Subtle snapping noises let her know the candy is breaking apart. Once it's crushed into tiny pieces, she gathers some in her palm and sprinkles it over the cooling fudge. The larger chunks of candy will give the fudge a nice, crunchy texture, while the smaller ones will lend an extra bit of peppermint essence. Sophie carries the fudge over to the cooling racks, where it will wait until it's ready to be sliced and served. In the meantime, she'll wash up the pot and prepare the next 2 batches. Before she begins the next batch, she zests a whole orange. She'll use the little flecks of peel to give the fudge a brighter, citrusy flavor, in combination with orange oil. Once she has the chocolate chips melted and stirred together with the milk, she adds the zest and oil in the pan. This melted fudge glistens in the light. The oil blends it a silkier texture. Sophie can picture the way it will melt in her mouth when she takes the first bite. She places curls of candied orange peel across the top of the fudge, gently pressing them down so they'll cool in place. Then she pops 1 piece in her mouth, delighting in the sharp citrus flavor muted by the thickness coating. Finally, it's time to make the hazelnut fudge. Justice is about to put the water on the stove. Rose appears on the other side of the counter. "Sure is foggy out there," she says to Sophie. Rose tells her she got turned around this morning leaving her house and thought for a while that she'd gone the wrong way. The fog was so thick she could barely see her hands in front of her. But then in the distance she saw the twinkling lights in the bay. The bakery windows, they were like little guiding stars, ushering her through the gloom to her home away from home. Sophie smiles broadly as Rose recounts her tale, and she's particularly excited to let Rose know that there's hazelnut fudge coming her way later on. "Oh, that's my favorite," Rose says, clapping her mittened hands together softly. Sophie pours a cup of coffee and hands it to Rose, who carries it over to a comfy seat by the window. Returning to the stove, Sophie sets up the double boiler and combines the chocolate and milk, just like before. Then, she removes the mixture from the heat, adds hazelnut flavoring and some crushed hazelnut pieces,
and pours it into the lined pan to finish it off. She carefully places whole hazelnuts in neat rows across the top of the fudge. Every piece will have one, adding crunch and depth of flavor. Glancing over at Rose sees the other woman smiling. As she catches a whiff of the hazelnut fudge, the rich scent permeates the air, mingling with the orange and peppermint. Perfect medley for a chilly day. While she waits for the fudge to cool, Sophie decides she'll use the time to get the bulbs in the ground. Besides, it's a slow day, and I'll be able to see anyone coming in, she thinks. She walks over to Rose and lightly rests a hand on her shoulder. "I'll be outside if you need anything," she says. To her surprise, Rose offers to help. How lovely to have company out in the garden, Sophie thinks. While she feels completely at ease spending time alone with her plants, she always enjoys time spent with good friends. And after so many years, Rose is most definitely a good friend. Together, Sophie and Rose head to the door, slipping on their coats and scarves on the way out. When they reach the small garden, Sophie pulls the bag of flower bulbs out of her pocket. Rose lifts the lid of the old workbench, where a few well-worn tools are kept, and finds a couple of trowels. The two women kneel down together, laughing as the damp earth seeps through the knees of their trousers, cool and familiar. Side by side, they begin to dig, their conversation flowing as easily as the rhythm of their hands. They reminisce about the many seasons that have passed here at the bakery, like the time Max from the hardware store mistakenly ordered 12 dozen cupcakes instead of 2 for his daughter's birthday. For days afterward, they were practically begging customers to take cupcakes home with them. And then there was that summer storm, the one that flooded a few roads and stranded travelers in town. The bakery became a refuge. People gathered there for warmth and comfort, sharing coffee, snacks, blankets, and even children's books until the rain subsided and the roads were repaired. "We've had some good times here, haven't we?" Rose says softly, patting down the soil around the last flower bulb. Sophie nods, her smile tender. They stand together, side by side, admiring their work in peaceful silence. Hearts full of gratitude for all the years and memories they've shared. As the fog settles outside, the fairy lights above the bakery door shimmer gently, tiny guiding stars in the gray morning, welcoming anyone who needs a home away from home. No matter the weather, there will always be warmth here at the Rainy Day Bakery.